put my face anywhere that I can't breathe.
Correct, yes.
So how do you navigate that?
It was difficult.
I feel like that is exactly what you say.
Darling, I would like to know that I affirm your autonomy and your bodily choices, but I'm going to affirm my choice to not put my face there. You know, like, is there a gracious way to do that?
Perhaps at the start, but when you are in the middle of things, I think graciousness has gone out of the window.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. That's
Yes,
something
it
I
is.
have not had to deal with yet.
Yeah. Never come up.
Thankfully.
I mean, I don't mean to just keep posing the question, but it really does seem like a legitimate problem to have.
Yes.
You know, odors and everything else. So, I mean, is that really the best way to address it? Just take it head on. You know, boldness is needed, and you just sort of say point blank, "I'm sorry," until you bathe. I don't want to do this. Is there maybe a sexier way of optioning that?
What I would do if I was interested in continuing, because if you're not interested in continuing, then do not, because then that is no longer positive, enthusiastic consent.
Thank you for once again explaining consent.
But what I would do is say, I'm going to go wash up real quick.
Sure.
Do you want to after me? Or like make it available. Have like hygiene, like wipes or something in your bathroom in general. Especially guys. Do this. Have just some baby wipes.
Yeah.
In your bathroom, if you're having people come over, like it's a nice thing to
That might be
have.
my number one dating tip, actually.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten so many comments on the fact that I just have baby wipes. It's not hard. It's not expensive.
It's actually, it will leave a mark in a good way with your dates. But yeah, I would say I'm going to go wash up super quick.
And then, if they don't take you up on the offer, then after you're done showering, you're jumping into those sweatpants and making aggressive
I
yawning
was
kind
so
of noises.
turned on, but then the water was just so
Something
hot.
about,
and I just remembered
Now
I
I'm
had to do
tired.
something tomorrow, super early.
Yikes. Okay, well, this is deeply horrifying, and I also need a little bit of time to myself to just process my sexual feelings about Serafina's dark persona.
In the end, we are all by ourselves.
If you could just follow me around and say nihilistic things into my ear, that we may need to negotiate that later.
Oh, I will.
But in the meantime, I'd like to jump on the phones if we can and talk to Rod in Arizona. Rod, you're on the air. What can we do for you tonight?
How you doing, Christy? It's a pleasure speaking to you guys this evening. I've been noticing a major trend going across the secular community on some misconceptions in regards to gender being a social construct, and how some individuals tend to either have this, I was saying it's a general misconception on what social constructionism is and what it isn't. But before we get into that, can I ask, what do you, in your guys' opinion, what exactly do you guys define as social? Are you guys social constructionists? Do you agree with gender being a social construct? I'd just love to hear your guys' opinion on that.
Yeah, this is such a tricky one because I do feel like our words are starting to bleed into each other and get mixed up. And we kind of used to keep sex and gender as sort of separate categories. And we recognized that sex was biologically based and that gender was more of a social construct. But these things are starting to sort of blend into each other, aren't they?
Yeah, I would say that
They are.
we don't yet have any kind of scientific consensus that lets us go to, this is the definition of gender. We have working definitions and ones that we understand more and less, and ones that work for making the points that we need to make about gender. But I would say that at this point, I would go with a social construction type response. But I'm also open to continuing to look at the research and see where that goes.
Yeah, and these things are informed by biology and these other things. And we recognize that our biology isn't just a two-box system of male and female. That is certainly a much more sophisticated spectrum than that. But yeah, I guess I would agree that gender is a social construct that is informed by biology.
Exactly. Yeah, see, a lot of the individuals I've been running into in regards to social media and stuff, this is social media, what do you expect? But I've been seeing a trend of individuals in where they basically miscue the social construct position as like we're saying that the only way reality is based is if it's socially constructed. So basically, as far as my understanding goes, because I've been taking a lot of philosophy as of late, and as far as where I've been reading, social constructionism is nothing more than a methodology of determining knowledge on how we add labels and descriptors onto things that we see as humans in nature. You know, things in nature exist without any descriptors. Sure. And we as a culture, we as humans, decide what applications, what descriptors we add onto those things we see in nature. And a lot of people are twisting that to make it seem like we're saying that, because I am a social constructionist, by the way, but it seems like a lot of people are twisting that to make it seem like the only way these things exist is through the social process. And that's just not what social constructionism is. And I've been seeing this narrative, this twisting of this type of critique on social constructionists from guys like, and I'm not trying to run people through the mud here, but individuals like Steven Pinker and a lot of the more centrist, right-leaning type of individuals who are pushing this narrative of social constructionism. Really, that's not what it stands for.
Mm-hmm. If you look at all of life and you look through all of the creatures on the planet, you will find nothing to say this is a genus, this is a kingdom. Yet these social constructs refer to accurate things that exist in the world. They are not merely made up.
So it's a matter of taxonomy and nomenclature and just where we draw our lines.
These are semantic games that we play to describe things which are more complex than we can speak in a few sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And in case Rod has not been watching, that is death on the line.
It is a pleasure to meet you again.
No, but it's just, I just think it's a big issue because this goes to the core of individuals who are like trans medicalists, people who are have an issue with referring people as non-binary, as trans. This goes in the heart of this issue because a lot. I regard these individuals as somewhat reactionary in regards to their views. They may have some very very, very common sense, what seems to be very understanding views, but they take this science realism type of ideology, like the only thing that exists is purely based on science. It has no basis on psychology. It has no basis on things we see as humans from our experiences in culture. And they think everything that is based in reality is strictly based on that. And that's just not how it works. And that's the problem I've been seeing. It's a huge problem. I've had discussions with people online, some prominent members in this mentality. And another issue this comes up is when it comes to transmedicalism, is like I had a discussion with someone about the subject of transmedicalism, for example, and I'm a very critical person in regards to this methodology when it comes to what is a trans person or not, because the major reason why I have a problem with this is it excludes other people that may not have gotten a diagnosis for gender dysphoria. They're saying that you're only trans, for example, when it comes to the social constructionist viewpoint, you're only trans if you have gotten either a medical diagnosis or you have gotten a diagnosis and you're transitioning. Yet there are circumstances, I guarantee a lot of people, all of us know, there are places in the world where people can either financially afford to get a diagnosis or cannot afford to get a diagnosis based on the region you're in, especially in the Middle East, or they can't transition because of medical reasons. Maybe they have a heart problem and the HRT transition would affect because, HRT reduces your blood vessels and stuff and has an effect on your cardiovascular system. Maybe they can't transition that way. But they still would make every definition of being trans for when it comes to protections, legalities, and stuff. But it just seems like these individuals want to have an exclusionary policy against these individuals, which would put them at a huge disadvantage in society. It's scary for me that this is where a lot of skeptics' mind frame is at, and I don't know where to go from there.
This viewpoint that you speak of, the worldview and paradigm where one does not need to look into things deeper, is very convenient and very reinforcing of prior beliefs. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it must be popular among people who wish to hold their previous beliefs, even if they call themselves skeptics. It merely means to them that they have seen the truth, and they cannot be convinced of something without very specific criteria. And those criteria are not always accurate.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and this is something that I see in my office all the time. I mean, this is true. I actually spoke to somebody recently and am commissioning an artist to draw up a couple of graphs for me to put in my therapy office, and included in that is a bimodal distribution.
Right.
Everybody can go and Google what that phrase means real quickly if they're interested, but a bimodal distribution basically is how our gender tends to map when we map it out. It's not just two boxes of men over here and women over here. They're asymptotic, which is to say that bell curve, that statistical graphing, doesn't ever reach zero. So there are people who are dead in the middle. There are people who are at the top of what we'll call the feminine curve and the masculine curve. And there are folks all up and down that line. And I guess I would tell you, Rod, the best way I've been able to describe it to people is in talking about color. Asking somebody, is this purple? Is this blue? Is this violet? Because all of those things are real things. We can, like Sarah pointed out with regard to genus and species, we can acknowledge that we're mapping these concepts onto something that's actually there. But the culture that you're in, the way your eyes work, the lighting that you're standing in, all of these things dramatically... Yeah, all of that dramatically affects whether you see something as purple or violet or blue.
Yeah.
Like that dress.
That damn dress.
That goddamn dress.
No, see, I am a social constructionist, but see, one of the biggest, even my own critiques of social constructionism I have is in reference to people that make the claim that everything is a social construct. That is generally true, but it's also not true in some regards as well. For example, I'll give you a prime example of this. If you look in nature, if you look at the scope of the universe, the reason why things become a social construct is the labels and descriptors we add into things. But if we make a claim, 100% claim, that everything is a social construct in the universe, this is not true, because there are things in the universe that we have yet to see or have been able to pick up in nature that we've been able to add in descriptors. So it is generally accepted. Everything in the known universe, things that humans can perceive, is a social construct, but not everything in the universe. Does that make any sense, what I'm saying?
I would say so. I think it ties neatly into the concept of classical. I think it's idealism, and the concept that there are ideal forms of things that are out there somewhere. So I have 2 rings on my hands right now. And the concept of two does not exist anywhere. It is a social construct that we've created, but that still means that there are 2 things on my hands, and that remains the same whether or not we use the word two to describe them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely concur with you on that. So that's pretty much what I want to address. I just wanted to get your guys' take in reference to this. I don't know how you would describe it, this phenomenon that's happening in the secular community. It's just, to me, it's disturbing because, again, this is something people are using as some form of weaponized concept to go after or speak against people that are either, social advocates relating to this subject, and they are using it to try to exclude themselves. Or to me, I'm going to put it bluntly, and I'm not going to try to be very mean here, but I have to put it bluntly. I think, to me, at the end of the day, it's the individuals who push this narrative are trying to make them or appease the people that are bigoted toward them. They're trying to present themselves in a positive light toward these individuals. Like, oh, I have a legitimate reason. And they're trying to pander to this demographic of people that have showed them hatred this whole time. And they figure that the only way that they'll ever be accepted is to show the same hatred they showed other people. They claim they don't hate people, but realistically, they may not generally in principle, but they generally do in regards to excluding other groups. And I think that's just, it's easier to find acceptance on a general hate of another group if you have a hatred. It's pretty sad for me. It goes against secular humanism, but what do I know?
That's a really good point, and I agree with you. It's something I read this book, Victory, and it was a description of the gay rights movement from the 70s through the 2000s. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it. But one of the through lines was that at the beginning, at Stonewall, at these first riots and these first moments of, hey, we deserve this equality, there were trans people right there with everyone else doing the thing and making these strides and being these important figureheads. But as they slowly became more and more embraced by the mainstream, the people who did not fit certain stereotypical norms were pushed away to leave the group respectable. So cis, white, gay men, and to an extent, cis, white, gay women were then ushered into the back room, like, okay, fine, you can come in, but you have to leave everyone else out there. And so, yeah, it is an ongoing issue that in order to gain the credibility and respectability that the masses will give certain people, you leave others behind, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the events like you've just mentioned historically of Stonewall, it's still going on. I mean, there was a recent group, I'm not going to name drop here, but there's a recent group that formed up that legitimately removed the concept of transgender or transsexual individuals from their label. And they're doing this to exclude these individuals from their group. And again, to me, this is a huge problem because every one of these individuals may not have a similar world experience, but they share a similar situation when it comes to, advocating for the same rights and protections that they all need in reference to fighting against any form of issue that may come when it comes to legality, when it comes to rights, treatments, workplace protections. The stuff that I'm talking about. And it's sad for me that, like I said, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it's just people are trying to find acceptance through hate instead of acceptance through unity. And it's sad for me, but I don't know what to do. So, yeah.
In many ways, our social identity is formed not by our concepts of who and what we are, but of who and what we are not. And so we must separate ourselves from the other. It is a tragedy of our psychology.
You're saying very important things, but I just applaud your commitment.
Oh. I'm just curious, Death. What do you identify as? Do you define yourself as neutral, or?
I am the end of all.
All right, guys. Like I said, I just wanted to get your guys' feedback on this. I greatly appreciate your information. Hopefully, this narrative eventually goes away, because I feel that it's incredibly harmful. We should all be fighting for equality for everyone and not trying to, appease a specific group. I know you guys can't voice too much on your political opinions because you guys are 501c. I respect that as well. But I do, like I said, appreciate your guys' take in reference to what you guys could answer. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. That was a really good observation.
Yeah, no, and very well said. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your call, Rod. Be seeing you.
Thanks, guys. And Death, don't come for me anytime soon.
Perhaps.
Nice.
All right, guys. You guys take care.
All right, you too.
For anyone out there watching, Science Vet has a really good Twitter thread on bimodal sex and gender and all of that.
It's actually included in a post that I wrote for the ACA during the kerfluffle, and so that's available on my website, which is just vcatx.com. But Science Vet on Twitter, I think it's at Science Vet too, is it not?
It's so popular that you can Google Science Vet. Sex and gender, and it'll pop up first result. I have it bookmarked because I give it out to so many people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's an important thing to be able to find strength in numbers as opposed to finding strength by subdividing infinitely into different groups with competing agendas.
Well, and I've pointed it out before, but it's worth saying again, the reason we use LGBT is because we put lesbians first after recognizing for so many years that gay men were not including lesbians as legitimate or as actual members of the queer community. And the queer community, really like all marginalized communities, has a long history of not necessarily respecting all of its members, of when there are not enough resources, when there is desperation, when there's marginalization, we tend to grab whatever we can, even if that means shoving other people out. And, as you go down the acronym of LG, you look at bi and how bisexuality was really not seen as legitimate by mainstream public until, even in many places still, bi is just a stop on the way to gay town or whatever
still
else.
Half in the closet.
Right. All of that kind of stuff. And, as we get to the end of the acronym, we see the T. And I, on the one hand, want to recognize everything Rod is saying as being very true, and I'm horrified by the violence and the other constant news stories and issues experienced by the trans community. I'm also very hopeful that the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that there is pushback, the fact that there is, like inflammation, and the way fundamentalism comes out whenever there's progress on these types of issues. I see it as a good sign, even as it is a really terrible thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that a lot of people in the skeptic community have deconstructed a certain part of their worldview, the God part, but they haven't necessarily done the work that they need to do in other areas, and they are still living in a very religiously influenced culture, probably working through viewing things through a lens that was given to them by maybe a religious family or a religious past. So yeah, I think I would just encourage skeptical people in general, don't stop with one question.
Yeah,
it's a way
everything.
of being. It's a way of viewing the world. Get more information. And if you feel like you have a concrete yes or no answer, that's a good sign that maybe you need to do more research, because there are very few concrete yes or no answers out there.
Sure. On that note, we talked a little bit about, I guess, sort of the horrors of online dating.
Yes.
Death, you had a online dating horror story for us.
What I have is a message that was sent to someone. It was unprompted from someone that had not introduced themselves on a website of kink-related phenomena. It begins